This resolution had its birth. Little church in Wallingford. Lauren and I are both associate pastors there. A couple years ago, my husband and I, Irv Hallman, he's one of the drafters of the resolution here, decided to pull out of Bank of America because we didn't like what they were doing with their money with environmental stuff. And then, of course, right after we did that, came the big crash and everything else. And in the meantime, just recently, our little church Keystone pulled its money out of Bank of America and went to a local bank, because we believe in doing local things, and we're in the process of pulling out of Chase as well, and investing in United Church funds instead of the CDs we have through Chase. So this is important to us. A couple of years ago, the United Church of Christ asked for regular people, churches, congregations, conferences, to examine their banking practices. And our conference has already pulled from their checking account out of Bank of America, and now they have left to pull out credit cards and adjust their credit cards to reflect the practices that the United Church of Christ is asking us to examine. So this resolution, in part, is to help our own conference encourage them to fulfill that vision, as well as individual people and congregations. So that's how this sort of got started and why it's here today. Lauren?
Greetings again. Lauren Cannon, recently called to Keystone UCC in Wallingford in Seattle, and co-pastor associate with Peg and Rich Gamble. You may see on your note, as much as we're going to shock you, Peg and I are not Rich Gamble. He's actually presenting the other. So we also have members joining us from the Justice and Witness Ministry Committee of our PNC, and that committee submitted this, and so there'll be more of us in the room. And we wanted to just give a little overview of why we were so convicted that this was the time to bring this forward. Some of us were at General Synod 28 in Tampa, where the whole body decided to take up study of our financial practices, and so we are part of that mandate coming out of our wider church to look at this in every setting of the United Church of Christ. And you can find notes on that at ucc.org/justice/banks, and it'll show the approved resolution unanimously to put our money where our values are, evaluating relationships. And that resolution calls on all churches in other settings to, quote, faithfully examine their relationships with financial institutions, where practical and prudent, deliberately move toward relating to financial institutions that have records of fair lending, business and investing practices as each body discerns for its setting. And there's several resources there that your congregation could use as a source. But we were especially convinced that this was the moment because we believe that if, as a body, we decide that this is worth our study, we kind of have an umbrella to do this in every church setting. And in some ways, perhaps like last year, being able to vote for O&A conversations, our prayer is that if we move at this meeting to make this a commitment, that then each church will have some support to really take up these very complex, difficult questions. One quick note on some particulars, as Peg referred to, over the past 2 to 3 years, we may not all know this, so this is serving as a quick update. The Pacific Northwest Conference has most of its accounts moved, and It began as a practical, really customer service related move. We've learned from the office, and it has actually sort of grown in scope, but the accounts were moved to Banner Bank. And what's tricky is that the credit card for the conference has not yet been able to move, and we're hoping that this resolution will help us take up study with that. The credit cards, as you may know, have been trickier because there are so many restrictions that kind of sometimes lock in for a few years at a time. There's control over debit cards or welfare, school lunch cards. It gets pretty wound up together. But we're hoping that if we can move the last piece and do so as a public witness with the conference credit card, that this will guide also our future conversations, that they not only have that practical base, but a real moral base to the conversation. And that we may even get to a point, pray tell, where in the future, with enough public pressure, things could move back or move in a new direction. Michelle Johansson in the office has told us she's currently researching 4 to 5 alternatives to have that information available to us. Credit cards run by local and regional banks, and you'll see that the resolution today empowers our board of directors of the PNC to do this work on all of our behalf in the way that they see fit. And so we wanted to just kind of end that introduction with the sense that we see this growing practice and really the moral component to it as a crucial part of this. And to give us heart, I wanted to tell the story. Some of you may know this. In January, 2 of our partner agencies moved their money. The Faith Action Network, statewide interfaith advocacy, as well as the Church Council of Greater Seattle, did a witness where they moved from Bank of America. They were set up for a protest January 11th outside of the University District Bank of America, and they moved it on down the street. The Faith Action Network is now banking at BECU, and the Church Council of Greater Seattle, with their $2 million annual budget, is now, and representing 340 local churches, now uses a community bank called Home Street Bank. So their hope was to promote local investment and help those most affected by the economic downturn. And some notes there were that they really claimed that Bank of America's practices were greedy and sinful, and that they found that BECU, as Washington's largest community bank, was much more in line. So we take heart from that, and through some of these connections, we know how many denominations and bodies are also struggling with this question. We're in good company, and we're eager for your questions and do our best on behalf of the committee to answer.
I'm Dennis Hollinger-Land. I'm pastor at Wayside Church in Federal Way. I've been asked to be the moderator for this hearing, so I want to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of what we're going to be doing in the next several minutes. First of all, how many are here because you have the number 4 on your badge? So you're here because you have voice and you also have vote. How many people are here because you want to sit in and you might want to speak to this, but maybe won't have a vote? Okay. So I want to know who I can call out of order if I need to. It's only been in the last few years that we brought resolutions back into the conference, and we're operating on a General Synod model. How many of you have been to a General Synod where you've been part of committees and hearings? Okay, so to explain this, now that this resolution is in this room, it is ours. As a group in this hearing, you have the ability not just to ask questions, but to amend or change the wording of this resolution, but you cannot change the general intent. When we walk out of this room, hopefully we will have a consensus on what we want to do with this resolution and recommending it to the plenary session of the Pacific Northwest Conference. So we can go out of here saying we recommend this as it is, we recommend this as we've amended it, we recommend that the conference take a no vote on this, so there are several options that we have. So in the next few minutes, we'll have an opportunity for people to ask questions of the presenters on this. There will be opportunities for you to speak for or against this resolution. We can amend and change the last two paragraphs where it says, therefore be it resolved. We cannot go back up and change anything in the whereas section. That's all background information. Yes?
Are there copies for us to look at here?
There were some extra copies of the resolution, or they're still extra?
They're all out now.
They're all out, so if you can find someone. Is it necessary to read the therefore be it resolved? We're not going to read through the whole, but if you have the paper there and you're comfortable, I don't even want to reread that. So at this point, as the hearing, do you have questions about how the hearing is going to proceed? We have a scribe, Mary Miller, and she will be taking down notes and recording diligently what kind of a consensus we come to. So are there questions out there that you have of the presenters of this resolution? David and...
I'd like to, if you've got a microphone, I'd like to give an observation.
Hang on. Where's our hostess for this meeting? Where did she go?
I can't walk right for it.
That's fine. Well, there she is, and we'll give her the traveling microphone. And please identify yourself and what church you're with.
My name is Dave Andreessen.
Hang on.
Button on the bottom, I think.
There you go.
It's on.
Yeah, it's on.
Yep.
My name is Dave Andreessen. I'm a member of Norby Park and have been since 1967. I am a retiree from Bank of America. I don't think in this resolution, or what I've heard so far, has been addressed. Alan Greenspan allowed the banks to bundle mortgages in 100 mortgages at a time and sell them as securities around the world. Part of that example was Countrywide. Countrywide held 3 applied mortgages originated in this country. When the collapse of Countrywide happened, Bank of America was forced by the Federal Reserve to buy them. They were then saddled with these mortgages of no value. As the foreign banks call, as a mortgage failed within the 100 units, the banks in Europe required the banks here to take back the whole 100 securities. So not only did it create a problem in Europe, it created a problem here. And I don't think this room is really aware of that. From all the conversations I've had and heard, and I keep abreast of it every day because it affects us in many, many ways. That's my observation.
There's right there.
I'm Paul Pruitt, a member of Father Red Church for 25 years, UCC. I am here from another, I will not be voting, but I am very much in favor of this. I just wanted to give you some information since Church Council of Greater Seattle, we are telling about them with withdrawing money, we have a committee through Church Council, which I'm on, that is following through to encourage more of this. That's not new to some of you. But I just want to mention a couple things that we're finding out and in this campaign, and we're very active in it. My own part on this committee is working with Seattle City Council to work through and encourage this committee, the Church Council of Greater Seattle, to reinvest their monies. And it's not just simply telling them what to do, but working with them, particularly Nick Licata, on what are the problems that they have to retransfer their money. And I'm in communications with Nick Licata and Seattle City Council on behalf of our committee, the Church Council. One thing we're finding out, which I think needs to be checked on, and don't take my word for it, but I think it's happening, but you check. I think we're quite concentrated at Bank of America. In fact, my wife and I have withdrawn our money from Bank of America and gone into a credit union. But the rumor is, and it may be factual, but something to check on, that it may be that one of the good local banks, which I'm glad we're talking in terms you might invest in one of them, that there is a rumor, and we think it is factual, that some of them are being tempted to sell out and to enough money that they sell out, and they will not be, and they will be performing the kind of things that the big banks do because of a lot of money coming in, and they kind of join the big banks because the big banks are paying them that money.
Okay, do you have any comments on sort of the resolution that's before us?
I think that I just wanted you to know, for this information, since Church Council and what it has started, it's only that, yeah.
Okay. We have another person over here who would like to speak, and then over here, and then we'll come to the back.
Would it be appropriate?
Yeah, identify yourself, please, and where you're from.
John Sundquist, University Congregation.
Okay.
Would it be appropriate to amend the resolution to say that credit unions, which are cooperatives, rather than banks that are owned by stockholders, should be seriously considered?
Okay. I think we can do that. I think before we start amendments, I'd like to try to get some more discussion going, but yeah. So there was one over here, and then we'll come to the back. There was Dan and Jason.
I know there was talk of taking it out of the credit cards, out of the bigger banks. But since most of the credit cards are either run by MasterCard, Visa, Discover Card, or American Express, how is that going to make any kind of difference? So, I mean, I understand with the money, but ultimately the credit cards are basically run by these organizations, and before we go through all the hoops of taking the money out of, or the credit cards from Bank of America to somewhere else, we also need to make sure that the background, whatever organization that owns the credit card ultimately, it doesn't make a darn bit of difference if you take it away from B of A and take it to a credit union if it's still owned by Visa. And Visa is wrong. So I'm just saying that that's something else. If we're going to go through all the hoops, if it's not going to make a difference, it's really hard moving a business credit card.
Okay, and I'll let you
But
speak
that was
to
just
that, Peg or Lauren.
Yeah, that was the question that I had, is
Right.
have we examined Visa, MasterCard, Discover Card, American Express, Diners Club, whatever there is, so.
And I think that the way this resolution is written, if I read it correctly, it does give the board of directors leeway. It's sort of a suggesting of what action they might take. But
Yeah, and credit unions that do have credit cards, so.
But that are not run by Visa?
Mhm.
Who accepts them?
Usually run through bigger banks.
Who accepts them, though?
That's a good question. Laura, do you know?
I think you need to investigate that.
That's what I'm saying.
hang on just a second, one question at a time.
Well, but the information's incorrect.
Visa was started by Bank of America, so.
We know from the conference office, as I mentioned, that Michelle Johansson is looking into 4 or 5 that are local, regional based, and she's very committed to them being, usable. So we're going to have to defer to the board's work with Michelle unless others know more.
Okay, there are people in the back. Dan?
I'm Dan Stern, pastor, Broadview Community United Church of Christ in North Seattle. And I speak in favor of the resolution. Broadview Church, about almost 2 years ago, I think it was that long, took our funds out of 2 banks, Chase and Bank of America, and joined with a credit union. We're blessed in Washington State to have more credit unions statewide. BECU, which was Boeing employees initially, is the largest and most prominent around the state. But ours is called Verity Credit Union. It's right local, right there in North Seattle is the headquarters. And we were able to make a witness to, I felt, the people of the credit union itself, because most of the credit unions were founded in the 30s and are just quietly existing. And until some of this attention in recent months and years came up, we're not making much of a dent, and suddenly there was a lot of attention and withdrawal of funds. But before that, or around that time, Broadview had an interesting process of, they'd never had a church apply to become affiliated with the credit union. And so we took a few extra steps, but it was easy enough to, yes, we have still, it's not a pure system. I mean, we're still affiliated with the money system and the Visa cards and so on, but it's a step that we took that was both a witness in departure and a witness in entry point, where, and then a number of our members have done the same. And the joy of it is, at a personal level, is that you can still go to AMTs, what are they called?
ATMs.
Yeah, ATMs in Europe or around the world. There's affiliate connections with credit unions. And so I too would want to put a plug in for the possibility of not just local banks, which might come and go, but these longstanding credit unions, which are not-for-profit institutions that people owned and not corporate owned, and you have all the advantage and more sometimes. I mean, we're getting interest on our credit, on our checking now. We never got that at Bank of America or Chase. So I'm just saying, all the advantages plus some additional sense of appropriate justice seeking. We're not becoming pure by taking a step like this, but we're taking a step. And it feels good, and it feels like a witness.
Okay, Jason, I think, was next, and then we'll go to Donald.
Hi, I'm Jason Boyd from Kirkland Congregational Church, but I'm also speaking as a member of the Board of Directors of the Church Council of Greater Seattle. And I want to strongly urge all of you to vote in support of this resolution. In January, the event that Lauren referenced earlier, when the Faith Action Network removed its funds from Bank of America, I was present for that. And of course, the Church Council of Greater Seattle has done the same. And let me tell you, it was noticed. It was noticed. And this sort of thing is happening all across the country right now. And if you've noticed some changes in bank commercials on television, they're warmer and fuzzier and trying to tell you how much they contribute to the community. There's some cause and effect here. This happening in Washington and Oklahoma and Virginia and every place is being noticed in the corporations. Maybe we're not going to change them overnight, but darn it, it's happening. It is happening. So I really want you to think and pray on this. You know, we talk about budgets as being moral documents. So is your checkbook. And where you keep your money matters. The things that others do with your money to the extent that they can also matter. And as Dan alluded to, this is a step that we can take. This is a great witness. It's a witness that has been done before and can be done again. And I think one that is very powerful. So I want to commend the authors of this resolution, and I stand with you wholeheartedly, and I pray that this is passed today, and that very soon that we can be certain that our money is not going to further corporate interests, is not held by corporations that pay no income taxes, but instead is held by institutions that really do give back to the community and more closely mirror what we stand for in the United Church of Christ.
Okay, if we could have Donald and then Lauren has some comments she would like to make.
Donald Schmidt, pastor at Admiral Church in West Seattle. Just quickly on the credit cards, yeah, they are all owned by Visa, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and they're not the most wonderful corporations. On the other hand, the ones through the credit unions are not for profit. The interest rates are lower, and again, it's feeding less profit into the hands of the ones that own the cards. But there aren't options. It's the way our society works. There are lots of things. You know, I shop at a co-op that's not for profit, but much of the produce they buy comes from profit wholesalers. It's reality, but you can lessen some of that profit nonsense. That piece to me is really important about switching financial institutions, because we, as the United Church of Christ, are not for profit. We ought to be supporting other not-for-profit organizations. And what the heck, I'm a proud member of BECU, and you know, in the first 3 months of this year, this is a fact, I earned on my checking account more interest than I earned in 2.5 years on my savings at Bank of America.
Oh, profit.
Now, the downside of that is it ain't a heck of a lot of money because interest rates really suck, but they're much higher at the credit union. And I'm not giving profits to shareholders. Nothing against shareholders, but I like to support a not-for-profit. It feels really important to me, and the benefits are much better. I also like the fact that this resolution, the second, therefore be it resolved, is a real classic, good United Church of Christ resolution. It asks churches to discuss this and explore it. And I can't think of a lot of things that are better than inviting a church to explore a moral issue and talk about it. And what the heck? They might decide they want to stay with the bank. That's their business. But it encourages them to discuss it, and discuss some of the morality and ethics involved in what we do with our money. Money is a very, very important thing in this society, for better or worse, and that ain't going to change, folks. But what we do with it can make a huge difference. It makes a witness, and it just, point blank, makes a difference to other people's lives. I think we as a church, as a local church, must explore that. So, vote in favor. Thanks.
Hey, Dennis.
Thank you. Hey, yes.
Before Lauren responds, could I just ask a question, because then she could incorporate that in her response?
You may.
Can you all hear me? The question that I have is and I don't
identify yourself, please.
Terry Tigan from Plymouth. I don't have a
Plymouth where?
I'm here without a vote, but if you'll allow me voice. Just a question, and this kind of, I hesitated a way to make this point because I remember the struggles, some of us remember the struggles over an investment in South Africa and the argument of whether it's best to stay engaged or to withdraw, and in the end it was the withdrawal that pushed that forward and made a difference in that society. But I'll just tell you, we have our banking funds at Bank of America still. When the letter came out last fall saying that there was now going to be an assessment of $30 or $25 a month for anybody that had less than $10,000 in the bank, it made me angry. That Saturday morning I went over to the bank to talk to our banker, and I said, I didn't get to him, I just talked to him. I said, well, I'd like to talk to John because this is really upsetting to me, and we're going to have to think about moving our money. I got a call on a Saturday. Not that we have that much money, you know, we're not huge, but we have an account. Got a call from the bank saying, we'd really like to talk to you. And that's my point. In the midst of all this, has there been an effort? I have a cousin's, well, anyway, a family by extension who's a vice president of B of A. And I remember at a wedding this summer, we were talking about this. She said, our practices are really starting to change. Is there in the midst of this an opportunity for dialogue with the bank, with people, and the one other little point I'd make on it is that we're talking about a international global corporation, but in every one of these corporations and organizations, we have people who live and work and make their living at these institutions in our community. Even though they are broadly based, we have people here who are, who are our neighbors, who are tied into that, and whatever social issue you're talking about, that's true, whether it's disarmament or whatever. So that's the question. Is there engagement going on in the midst of the pressure?
Okay, I'd like Lauren to respond, and then we'll take a look at the resolution.
I think we're seeing why we know this to be such a complex, deep conversation. It perhaps should have been our starting point, but in every conversation I've had, and it really sounds like each of you, it has begun with acknowledging that pretty much in each of our families we have connections between those who are very much struggling from within the big banks. And so when we take this up today, okay, on one hand it may really sound simplified, big banks bad and let's do something noble, but what we know is that this is a very deep conversation, and what I'm hearing is that in each of your settings, this moment in our country, you really are having these conversations across barbecues, across the bank desk, and that's very much in keeping with the spirit of this resolution as crafted, that we are asking the board of the Pacific Northwest Conference to struggle in conversation about our monies. So to me, some of what was so moving in the fall as people took collective action, really more in a movement approach, was not that just individuals on a Thursday afternoon moved their money, but on a Saturday in Seattle, for example, at Chase Bank, dozens and dozens and dozens together took action. So there's so many layers to this needing to be a conversation and not just a, sort of backdoor logistical move. But I really I hope we can come back to Dave's early question. You'll see in the whereas list, as you read through these, that the figure, this startling figure is before us. The Bank of America has received over $230 billion in federal assistance. This is probably not news to many, but Bank of America is not the worst and not the biggest. And a lot of us are struggling around Citibank, which has received $415 billion in overall federal subsidies. So there's not a bad guy intended in this resolution. What the focus is that we would struggle to act within our mission, and when we are finding that there may be alternatives that seem much more aligned with the kind of living that we want to do as a body of the Church of Christ, we are at least compelled to be researching this. And again, this resolution, if approved today, will put in motion the work of our board, and that's an ongoing conversation. But I wanted to come back to Dave's good question, because there's so many parts of this. So when you mentioned Countrywide and all of the foreclosure element of this, we also have other huge parts of it. And what was compelling to the writers really began with some of the amount of the stimulus package. As Bank of America took up Merrill Lynch's losses, our government guaranteed $118 billion in troubled assets relief program to Bank of America, and in the same way as Citigroup and others. But we were disturbed that most of the AIG money of the big depositor banks also got $12 billion worth of federal AIG backing, and that more subsidies than any other mega bank except for Citibank, which, you know, right there gets our attention. So as we look through the whereases as crafted, we also want to bring our attention this morning to the small print through the Rainforest Action Network. We've been particularly troubled by learning the relationship between Bank of America and the coal industry. And while one arm of our conference and national work is so hard at work on environmental justice and exposing some of the aspects of dirty coal, why, on the other hand, would our money be going to promoting that while we're all trying to struggle against climate change? So we have more resources we can share on that piece of it as well.
Where we're at as a group, and just sort of do a straw poll. And if we were to say, it's sort of the general consensus, what I want to do is, how many of you think it's sort of a general consensus that we would like to move this on to the plenary session as it is? How many of you think we don't want to recommend this to the plenary session? How many of you think we would recommend it, but we want to make some amendments? So how many of you would...
Wait. Or how about unsure?
And how much unsure?
I would need more information on the amendments before I could make that decision.
Right, well...
So,
straw poll.
I'm not ready to make the decision.
But somebody said, could we make some amendments? So I want to know if there's some of you out there that think we need to amend this somehow. So how many of you, just generally, this is not a vote, we're not walking out the door yet,
okay.
But how many of you would just like to recommend this to the plenary session sort of as is? And how many of you would oppose recommending this to the plenary session? And are any of you out there thinking that we need to make some amendments to the therefore be it resolved? Okay, so let me ask first, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the therefore be it resolved at this point? Sort of heard a lot of support for this. Then let's go yes, sir.
Could we make a distinction between the therefore be it resolved and the be it further resolved?
Well, yeah, both of those are what we can work with.
Okay.
We can't do anything with the whereases, but those last two paragraphs, sure. So for those of you who think we need amendments, we need let's start over here, and we need the microphone, and did you have an amendment you wish to make? Let's ask that.
I don't have an amendment I wish to make, but I am sympathetic to, I'm Leslie Cushman from Olympia, Washington, United Church of Olympia. I entirely support this resolution and would vote yes if we had this snap decision right now. But there's been a fascinating discussion about the possibility that it's not perfect. Things can't be perfect, but I'd like to hear what some of the amendment ideas are in case we can improve it before it goes to the whole body.
Okay. So those of you who, I saw some other hands for thinking that need to be amended. Let's go back there.
Hello. Yes, Pat Johnson from Shalom, UCC in Richland. I guess I need a little bit more background on this. Do we have to specifically give you permission to leave the Bank of America? Or is this just, do we have to do that? Or are you, whoever is in charge of making this decision and presented this, do they have to ask to change where our money is? That's a huge thing. Do I have an answer? Yay or nay?
And it would be interesting to have someone from the stewardship committee respond to that as well. Is there anyone from the steward? David?
The stewardship committee, by unanimous vote, took our money out of Bank of America, and we investigated the banks to where it should be. We had interviews with 5 different banks. The interview with Bank of America was not as convincing to us as the interview from Banner Bank. And Peter Robinson and myself both supported Banner Bank because the CEO of Banner Bank is a former executive vice president from Seattle First National Bank, which some people are a bad name or bad name. In 1982, Seattle First National Bank invested in the first oil crisis, known as Penn Square Bank in Oklahoma City, of which I was a team leader in that fiasco. Seattle First National Bank lost $1.6 billion of its $5.5 billion. That's why Seattle First essentially failed its stockholders. And in the ensuing process, 2 banks were allowed to bid on Seattle First, one being Bank of America, the other being the Bank of Tokyo. The Federal Reserve would not allow the Bank of Tokyo to come into the United States. So then Seattle First National Bank became a wholly owned subsidiary of Bank of America in San Francisco. Bank of America, as you know, merged with Nations Bank in Charlotte, North Carolina. There was supposed to be a merger of equals. It was never that way. Nations Bank wanted it put itself in a position to take over. And eventually, all the loan decisions on the West Coast were made out of, and are made out of, North Carolina. The Nations Bank at the time was a small bank compared to Bank of America. Bank of America now, at one point, just as of about 6 months ago, was the #1 bank. Now they're #2, and that is because of the write-ups they have had to sustain from Countrywide. That $200 or $300 billion that they've written off at this point are in mortgages that they cannot collect. That's why I emphasize that the problem is not Bank of America per se, it's the acquisition of Countrywide. And they were forced by the Fed to take on Countrywide.
If we could go back to Pat's original question.
The original question is, we elected to go to Banner Bank.
No, yeah, okay, so, and I think to go back, and David is correct in stating that it was the recommendation of the Stewardship Committee a few years back that the money part of the conference be transferred from Bank of America to Banner Bank, so that has been done. Do we need this kind of resolution? On the one hand, no, because the board of directors can make these decisions on behalf of the conference on their own. But my understanding is that periodically the resolutions such as this can come up as suggestions to the conference. Well, we have the authority as a conference delegation to direct our board of directors. We cannot direct local churches. We can suggest, that's the second for, therefore be it resolved. So the board of directors could do this on their own without any suggestions from the conference body, but from time to time it's good for the entire conference body to make resolutions of witness to direct our board of directors, if you so will.
Thank you for answering that. My question, other part of that is that the actual summary, I do not understand why specifically you are mentioning the Bank of America and other harmful banks. Why can't you just say what you say in the beginning, the summary, which is, it conflicts with the social justice values of the United Church of Christ. I really think when you live in a community which is composed of people that may go to your church, that may have interests, that have actually, the Bank of America has been supportive to things. I'm not saying they're the best choice for us right now, as a full body. It just kind of makes me cringe when one bank is singled out to be listed. I don't think that's right, and from a justice standpoint. And it really does bother me because Bank of America is a combination of a number of banks.
And I think,
so that's why
I'll tell you what I'm hearing, and I'll let either Lauren or Peg respond. I'm hearing that it's named in there under the therefore be it resolved, because that is the bank that we presently have a relationship with our credit card.
I understand that, and I understand why that is stated that way. I think we're mixing.
But I think that's why it's not directly stated in the second, in the be it further resolved.
Okay.
In terms of local churches,
Then
it's
I
an
guess I'm in
urging
favor of an amendment.
to ask local churches to look at who they are investing with and see if that's in line with their church's stance on social justice issues. But
what amendment are you? Nothing. When we heard earlier the language from our General Synod 28, you'll notice it was more in the fashion you describe, more general, putting our money where our values are, evaluating church financial relationships, and it calls on all parts of the UCC to faithfully examine their relationships with financial institutions where practical and prudent, deliberately move toward relating to financial institutions that have records of fair lending, business, and investing practices as each body discerns for its setting. So in some ways, it's perhaps an amendment would be heard that would be more in the spirit of that language. But I ask us, isn't it harder and harder as we go, that when it comes with some agreement from national, now at the regional, and the design is to really help each of our local churches get our teeth into this conversation. So it gets harder at each layer. And so, there's the reason it's so specific is because we want there to be a lot of transparency about where the conference banking or the credit card is now, and where, keep the goal as sparking conversations throughout every setting in the way that's going to be most localized in your setting.
okay, so let me ask at this point, are there specific amendments that people wish to make? And we have one. Okay, let's finish up with Pat first, and then we'll move forward.
Probably the most uninformed person about this in the whole room, and I'm a newbie. This is the first time I've been to a conference. But in any event, I will not probably place this in the proper form as far as a parliamentarian, but I do feel strongly that amendment should be placed somewhere in this that's allowable, that one specific bank not be mentioned. Not just Bank of America, but any bank, because I think we've all dealt with banks that have ceased to serve us, or I know somebody that lives by credit cards. They just look for the best deal and cancel one and get another one. So we definitely don't want that. So,
okay, so
that's what I would like. I would like Bank of America, the whole phrase taken out of there.
What would you like it to say instead?
Yeah, how would we reword that? Hang on a second.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Where do I go to do that?
I just thought maybe we could change it to, instead of Bank of America, change it to its current bank.
Yeah. How do we change the whereases, though?
You don't.
Then it's pointless.
Excuse me. The whereases are not voted upon. The whereases are strictly background material.
Then it's pointless to remove the name of the bank.
No, because the resolution that,
The whereases all mention Bank of America.
As for changing it to what she suggested as our current bank, you're talking about transparency. I think you're just hiding it. So I think people should know what's going on, but I don't like the whole idea of speaking current bank. All they have to do is find out who it is, and that still makes sense.
and the other difficulty that I'm seeing here is that if we say, and our relationship with our current bank, I'm hearing the committee proposers saying we want to end the credit card relationship. Are we talking Banner Bank, Bank of America?
And that's just it. That is always subject to change. So I guess I would go along, since I'm the one standing here, with saying, taking out under therefore be it resolved, amending it to end its relationship with its current bank. And then it goes on, it fits perfectly, and transfer its business to an institution whose goals are more consistent with the goals of the conference.
But our current bank is Banner Bank.
Our current bank is our current
Well, then
financial.
I don't think any bank should be in there. If you don't want to go away from, again, you're citing a certain bank that you are saying to anybody that would happen to read this. What we would be saying as a conference is that Banner Bank's the best.
Okay.
Well, it's the best for us.
Let me get parliamentarian here, which I don't like to do. What is your amendment? Just say current bank instead of Bank of America.
Sorry. No, because if you are now Banner Bank, you don't want to take that one away.
What is the amendment? What are you proposing?
Remove the name of any bank and just have them the option to choose a bank that is best fits the thoughts of our conference.
Let me ask again. How would you reword this?
Therefore be it resolved.
Therefore be it resolved that the annual meeting of the Pacific Northwest Conference of the United Church of Christ call on the Pacific Northwest Conference to
investigate, determine.
To transfer its business to an institution whose goals are more consistent, whose goals are consistent with the goals of the conference.
So the Pacific Northwest Conference to...
Say it again.
Yeah, say it again for our scribe.
The Northwest Conference of the United Church of Christ to have the freedom to transfer its business to an institution whose goals are more consistent with the goals of the conference if the need arises. Or you can put if the need arises at the beginning of the sentence. Does that make sense?
Is there a second to that amendment?
I'll second.
There is a second to that amendment. Is there discussion about this amendment? Donald in the back.
I'll wait for the microphone.
Donald Schmidt, with the amendment at all, happy to vote in favor, but I'm concerned with the words, if the need arises, because that to me renders the whole thing really subjective. I don't know what need, how would we define that? When might it arise or not arise? So if we could remove those words, I think the amendment is great.
I would concede to do that.
Okay, so that's considered a friendly amendment to the amendment. More discussion on the amendment. Go here, boom, and boom, and boom.
I think you moved here first.
Yes.
Mark Travis, pastor at the Congregation. I'm really confused because if we've already removed our relationship with Bank of America, then why are we saying, will they be resolved to end its relationship with Bank of America if we've already ended our relationship with
credit cards?
So then I would say we need to say to end our credit card relationship with Bank of America. Because I'm totally confused.
That's not correct.
Then I don't understand if we don't have a banking relationship with Bank of America, except for the credit card, this statement, I'm confused as to what the heck I'm supposed to be voting on, because I'm absolutely confused. If we don't have money in Bank of America, but with a credit card, this resolution makes no sense to me.
Well, the banking part, including the credit cards, is a relationship. So I think that word relationship covers that, to end its relationship with Bank of America. We don't have to name all the specifics of it, I don't think. So I think that word relationship takes care of that. And also, I don't know if this is appropriate, but what the amendment basically, as stated, it's on the floor, basically says what that second sentence states. So, investigate and determine the most appropriate institution to and effect this transfer to time most beneficial for the Pacific Northwest Conference, blah, 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 is saying pretty much what the amendment on the floor is saying. So, I don't know, I might suggest taking out that whole first sentence and combining.
Well, we need to work on the amendment that's on the floor right now. So there were some other questions over here. Let's go to the far one and then we'll come back to Jen.
I'm Beth Rossing from United Churches in Olympia. I understand the lady's concern. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name.
Pat.
Pat. I understand your concern very much about naming a bank. However, I disagree with the amendment because that's where we have our money. And I think
that's where we have our credit.
Our credit, right.
No, it's not.
It's not.
Okay, now I'm confused like Mark is.
So
Terribly.
if I can ask for a point of information, if that's not where...
MasterCard, Visa, MasterCard and Visa are two separate corporations, not owned by any bank. They're separate corporations. MasterCard was started by Citibank.
Wells Fargo.
Visa card was started by Bank of America. Now they are separate corporations, not governed by either bank. So when you're saying you're extracting your credit card, you're going to extract your credit card from either MasterCard or Visa or one of the other minor corporations involved. The four big corporations are MasterCard, Visa, American Express, and
Discover.
Yes, and Discover Card.
Okay, so I guess my question then to the proposers is, do we currently have a relationship with Bank of America?
A quick anecdote. Every time I pull out a card to do an exchange, there's an opportunity for a conversation. The climate of what we're learning has made me very conscious of my own personal practices. And I must say that for the conference to have a peripheral relationship with Bank of America through whether it's MasterCard or Visa, to be discovering that there's an alternative to have a credit card through a nonprofit credit is an opportunity that we obviously feel compelled that the body might consider. So the relationship, we could tweak just how fine the relationship is, but does our conference have an opportunity to be using a nonprofit means for our money?
Okay, the question one more time. Does the conference presently have a banking relationship with Bank of America?
Yes.
We do.
Well, if you have a Visa card, like I do, it says Bank of America on the back of it.
Okay.
Yours is
Yours says
Citibank.
Mine says Bank of America. It's Alaska Airlines, I'm getting miles.
The question was about the conference, though, not about your personal one.
Yeah.
Right, but as far as the information, I think.
No, because each one's going to be
Each one's different? They don't think we have a business relationship?
Visa licensed Bank of America to use the Visa name.
Right.
Okay, so we have one more
That's what it says
comment
on the back of
about the amendment, and we'll go back to that.
I'm Jeanette Salamani. I'm with the other Plymouth Church in the conference in Colfax. As far as the amendment is concerned, I guess my concern with removing it from the therefore be it resolved, part of the resolution is all those wherefores. Every single wherefore has Bank of America listed there in a negative light. So I'm just not
We can't
caring.
do anything.
Yeah, I know we can't do anything about it, but I'm just not caring that it's in the therefore be it resolved part of the motion, because what difference does it make? People are going to be reading all the wherefores. So to me, it's not that big of a deal since we can't change the things. As far as the relationship with the conference, as long as we have, or with Bank of America, as long as we have a conference credit card that says Bank of America on the credit card, means we're getting our credit card from Visa, MasterCard, whatever, through Bank of America. We have at least some relationship with them. And I know that Visa is separate from Bank of America, but as long as that name, Bank of America, is on the credit card, we are saying, or Chase, or whatever bank it is, we are saying that we are using Bank of America. And I have personally, I happen to live in a very small town. I bank with Chase. I like my Chase people, and the people who work there are all local people. I understand the need to examine this, and I absolutely am in favor of the idea of the board of directors examining all of our banking. But the idea of the profit and all of that, I would like to remind us that for all of those of us who are pastors, who have money in the pension funds, we are counting on corporations making profits so that someday we have a retirement. Now, I know that we may not be invested in Bank of America or Chase, the pension boards, but let's not lose sight of that fact as well. Profits are not the problem. It is perhaps misuse of profits, poorly acquired profits, corrupt profits, but let's try and remember all of that in our conversations. We count on profits, we count on our parishioners having jobs from companies that make profits so that they can donate to the church. We count on the government taxing all of us and the corporations making profits so that the government can supply safety nets.
And to the amendment, what are you?
The amendment, as far as I'm saying, is I think the amendment is pointless.
Okay, so could we have a rereading of the amendment? And then we need to, if you could give Mary the microphone, so.
Yeah, I did.
Who's Mary?
Right over here.
Oh.
I'm not Actually, I'm not sure, but I'm an editor, so I should be able to get through this. Looking then at the first, therefore be it resolved, and Pat, you need to correct me, that we, the annual meeting Pacific Northwest Conference at the UCC, call on the Pacific Northwest Conference, I think you're saying, Pat, to delete the phrase, to end its relationship with Bank of America and instead you're saying to transfer its business to an institution? Are you saying just delete that one phrase? Or are you saying to consider and transfer its business? I'm not sure.
The
I would say yes, that you are going to
So we're just deleting that. The amendment is that to call on the Pacific Northwest Conference to transfer its business to an institution whose goals are more consistent with the goals of the conference.
Consider it?
That is correct.
But
Okay.
you also said consider and I think you may need to.
Well, what I was trying to do is help this committee in a future time, so they don't have to go through this again.
Well,
In other words, but they already have the
That was
provision.
rescinded, was it not?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So
That
let's
was a
look at
friendly-
the amendment. The amendment has been made, the amendment has been seconded. So it would read, the Pacific Northwest Conference to transfer its business to an institution whose goals are more consistent with the goals of the conference. All those in favor of that resolution, or with that amendment, who have a voice and vote, if you would raise your voting cards. All of those who would be opposed to that, raise your voting cards. Do we have any tellers? Because it looks to me like we have a division of the House. And a division of the House simply means that we need to count the votes.
Did you want me to act as a teller?
Yeah, if you could, Terry, since you have voice with no vote.
Sure.
So.
I'll take.
Okay, we'll let Terry take those two. If you would raise your cards if you are in favor of the amendment.
Disagree with you. 9 on this side.
8, 17.
Okay, put your cards down. Please raise your cards if you are opposed to the amendment.
Mm-hmm. 10.
9.
19.
So that was 19.
19.
What about abstaining?
Abstain.
All those who wish to abstain, please raise your voting cards.
Looks like 2.
Okay. So the amendment is defeated. So we are back to the original as it's stated. Are there other amendments that people wish to propose?
Thank you. My name is Paul Venabus. I'm with Bethany UCC in Seattle.
Yeah, can you say that?
Closer. Okay, my name is Paul Venabus, and I'm with Bethany UCC in Seattle. I would like to offer a friendly amendment to the Be It Further Resolved section. About a year ago, our church went through this same process of examining our relationship with Bank of America and finding a different home for our deposits. It was not that easy. You know, at the first time, when we initiated the accounts, of course, it was Seafirst Bank, which was a local bank we felt very happy with, and subsequently we were unhappy with the lending practices that the Bank of America currently adopts. But it was difficult for us to know exactly where to move those funds. And I don't think there's enough actionable or useful information in the Be It Further Resolve to help other churches make a decision, an informed decision. Therefore, I would like to add a clause at the end that states what alternatives are available, and not by naming specific banks, but by giving some information about what are possible alternatives, one being the United Church Funds, others being community development banks, or regional banks, or credit unions. And so my wording, I guess, would be something along those lines that alternatives that may be favorably aligned with promotion of the common good would include the United Church Funds, community development banks, regional banks, and credit unions.
Okay, hang on while Mary gets this down.
So can I read back? So I think what he's saying is, under the second paragraph, be it further resolved that other churches, etc., participate in the life of Nehemiah, are encouraged to investigate the values and practices of financial institutions they utilize, to seek institutions that are most favorably aligned with the promotion of the alternative good.
The common good.
Common good, where alternatives that may be available include UCC funds, community development, banks, regional banks, or credit unions.
Yes.
And credit unions.
And credit unions.
Thank you. Cornerstone was also mentioned.
Well, UCC funds would be.
Okay.
Would Cornerstone be?
It's UCC funds and the United Church of Christ Cornerstone Fund, are two separate entities. That was the only reason I was making the distinction.
Okay.
Do you want to add
Yes,
Cornerstone, UCC funds and Cornerstone?
Yes, please.
Okay, so now the last sentence reads, for the promotion of the common good, where alternatives that could be available include UCC funds and Cornerstone Fund, community development banks, regional banks, and credit unions.
Okay.
Second.
Let me ask, so there is a second. Let me ask the presenters, do you consider this a friendly amendment?
As members of the Justice and Witness Committee of the PNC, our primary goal is that conversations take off in every setting of our churches. And if the body feels that this is, it's the kind of just detail needed to support those conversations, we would find this to be a friendly amendment. I think that it was written generally enough so that each setting can wrestle with it, can talk to the conference office, talk to national partners. So we weren't moved to be super specific, but if that helps encourage the conversation, we would accept it as a friendly.
So all of you parliamentarians help me out. Since it's a friendly amendment, do we need to have a consensus that we agree to that?
Yes.
We need to vote.
Then so it's friendly, but let's get a sense. How many of you like that friendly amendment? How many of you don't like that friendly amendment? How many of you want to abstain about the friendly amendment? Okay, it does look like the friendly amendment has been accepted. Let me please remind you. Wait.
It's a friendly amendment.
It was a friendly amendment. And so that... Okay. Is there discussion on the friendly amendment? It's been moved and seconded. Could somebody take the microphone to Joe?
Disagree.
Could you please identify yourself?
I'm sorry. I'm Joe Perdue from Fox Island United Church of Christ. I don't disagree with the friendly amendment, but I question, will this imply that the conference is endorsing only these organizations as a place to put our money and just kind of brush it aside every place else?
Well, as I heard the amendment, there were 2 UCC groups specifically mentioned, but there were other community groups that were unnamed, the sort of general category. Could you read those groups again, Mary?
So in the amendment, at the end of, adding to the end of the sentence on be it further resolved, that with the promotion of the common good, where alternatives that may be available include UCC funds and Cornerstone Fund, the community development banks, regional banks, and credit unions. I think your question does not, the way I've written it right now, it says include those options. It doesn't say only those options, but I'm not sure.
My understanding of the amendment is just to give some scope to what people might consider. So all of those in favor of accepting this amendment, once again, please raise your voting cards.
Friendly amendment.
No. We're voting.
We're voting anyway. Okay, put them down. All of those opposed to the friendly amendment, all of those abstaining from the friendly amendment. Okay, there are some 1, 2, 3, 4 abstentions, but that carries. Then let's go back. All of those. Are there any other amendments that you want to make? So all those in favor of.
Do we have to call the question?
I have to do it.
I call the question.
You call the question, okay, and I was getting to that, but thank you. All of those in favor of presenting the therefore be it resolved and be it further resolved as they have been amended to the plenary session, please raise your voting cards. All of those opposed to presenting, okay? All of those abstain. Okay, so, question, yes?
Point of information, what we just voted on, was that incorporating the two, yeah, thank you.
Was that incorporating the two amendments that were offered, or was that incorporating?
No, the first amendment
First one was voted down.
Okay, thank you.
So the first, therefore be it resolved paragraph stands as it is. The second, be it further resolved paragraph has the addition of institutions that may be considered. Please just let me remind you that when this goes to the floor, I will report briefly the action of this group, and when it gets to the whole body of the delegates, they have the opportunity to make amendments and ask questions again, but yes.
And we have the opportunity to start all over and make amendments.
You do.
Yep, okay.
So.
I'm not going to.
I'm not in charge of that, you can do whatever you want. Are there any questions before you leave? I want to thank you for your comments, your input. It's not an easy issue to grapple with, whether it's personal or institutional, so thank you very much. You have 7 minutes to